It is my honor to introduce our keynote speaker, Emily Stimpson Chapman, who will be sharing why we should not only reject abortion, but in vitro fertilization too, even when experiencing challenges like infertility. Emily Stimpson Chapman is a wife, mother, and best-selling Catholic author of over a dozen books and studies, including Letters to Myself from the End of the World, The Catholic Table, Finding Joy Where Food and Faith Meet, and These Beautiful Bones, An Everyday Theology of the Body. And on that note, you can buy these books and others at her table in the expo after the dinner. In recent years, she also has written studies for the Women's Ministry Endow, edited the Formed in Christ high school textbook series, and published 3 children's books with Scott Hahn. Currently, Emily is working with Word on Fire as the author of their new Catholic Story Bible for Children. You can find Emily on Substack, where she writes the popular weekly newsletter Through a Glass Darkly, and co-hosts the podcast Visitation Sessions. You also can find her in a rambling old house in Steubenville, Ohio, where she and her husband Chris are raising their 3 young children, ages 6, 4, and 3. I'd also like to note personally that I'm a big fan, and Emily has been a personal inspiration to me over the past few years. Please put your hands together for Emily Stimpson Chapman.
Hello. I'm going to try to get this down here. I am shorter than other people who've been talking. It is such an honor to be here with you tonight. My grandma is actually Canadian. She's French-Canadian. Her parents immigrated from New Brunswick about 100 years ago. My great-grandma was one of 21 children. Yeah, so I like to think she's really happy that I'm here tonight. Today was actually a very emotional day for me. Lots of reasons, white smoke, but also because of my children. This was their first introduction to the pro-life movement and the issue of abortion. They are very young, 6, 4, and 4 now. We just had a birthday. And we've been waiting to talk with them about this. And this was about as gentle and joyful of an introduction as we could give them. So thank you for being a part of that. Now, if you are wondering what a woman of my age is doing with 2 4-year-olds, that's okay. I sometimes have the same question. But I turned 50 last month. Yeah, so that number hits differently when you're still potty training. We're working on it. Okay, so in all seriousness, settle in, get comfortable, because we are going to start tonight with answering the question of why a 50-year-old woman has 2 4-year-olds. And it's going to take a minute. I ended up marrying later in life than I ever expected to or wanted to. I will spare you that saga and just tell you that the great will they or won't they couples of television history, like Sam and Diane, or Mulder and Scully, or Luke and Lorelai, have nothing on us. My friends didn't have to watch TV for a decade. We were totally entertaining. And when we did get married, babies did not come as soon or as fast as we hoped, despite our best efforts. And yeah, best efforts in that way. But I am a choleric redhead, so my best efforts are pretty intense on every front. And for 3 years, my life revolved around getting pregnant. I went on every fertility diet you can think of. I took more vitamins than I can remember. I dosed myself with every possible hormone, and I had not 1, not 2, but 3 NAPRO surgeries, all trying to conceive. Because I am Catholic, I also prayed about 4 dozen novenas, got blessed by more priests and relics than I could count, including John Paul II stole. Tried that one. I also drank some sort of magical milk powder from the Holy Land that is supposed to help you get pregnant, but didn't work. No babies, all of that. I got nothing, not even a miscarriage. And again, because I am a choleric redhead, my response was anger. Our striving and failing to conceive was one of the most heartbreaking, soul-shattering experiences of my life. Like, all I had ever wanted, ever since I was a little girl, was to be a mother. People would ask me when I was growing up, well, what do you want to be when you're an adult? And sometimes I would say, I want to be a writer. Sometimes I would say, I want to be a senator. Sometimes I would say, I want to be a detective who lives in a quaint British village and solves murders, because I read a lot of Agatha Christie. But I would always add, and of course, I want to be a mom. Like 5 babies at least. 5 babies at least. Like, that was my starting plan. And when it didn't happen, I felt betrayed. I felt betrayed by my body, which couldn't do the one thing a woman's body is literally designed to do, conceive a child. And I felt betrayed by God. I felt like I had done everything right. I had played by the rules. I had been the good Catholic girl. Like, I wrote for God. I worked for God. I wrote fundraising letters for God. Okay, if any of you have ever written fundraising letters, they are not fun. I thought, like, all the fundraising letters, maybe I get 1 baby, but I got nothing. And I was so angry some days I could have burned the world down. Other days, I felt guilty. I felt like I was being punished for something, but I didn't know what. I thought that God was angry at me and didn't trust me. Like, maybe he knew I would just mess up my children, that I couldn't be trusted to be a mother, that I wasn't good enough to be a mother. Basically, I felt like a failure. I felt like a failure as a woman. I felt like a failure as a wife. And I felt like a failure as a Catholic. And night after night, for months, I would lay in bed and sob myself to sleep. That is where I was in September 2017, when my husband Chris and I stopped at a shrine on the way to see his sister somewhere in New York. We went into the shrine, we got into the chapel, we knelt down to pray, and my prayer was the same as it was all the time. Like, Lord, give me a baby. Please, Lord, I just want a baby. Make me a mother. Please, God. And as I begged God for a baby, I started to cry. Like, not pretty, gentle, feminine tears, but big, ugly tears, the kind that smear your makeup all over your face and make your body shake. Like, if the prophet Samuel had been there at that point, he would have thought I was drunk as he thought Hannah was thousands of years ago. And in that moment, as I am sobbing and shaking on the chapel floor, my mind latched onto one thought. I wish we could do in vitro fertilization. I couldn't. I knew that. Not just because the church says no and I'm Catholic, like, it wasn't unthinking obedience, but because I knew why the church taught what it did about in vitro fertilization. I believed what the church taught. I understood it, and I agreed with it. And that made me angry, because I did not want to agree with those teachings. I did not want to believe them. I wanted to be just like any other infertile woman who didn't know what I knew about IVF and could walk into a clinic and take advantage of the one route that was open to her to conceive a child. And because I couldn't, I was bitterly angry. So I walked out of that chapel that day knowing we couldn't do IVF and feeling like I was never going to become a mother. So what happened? In November 2017, I got asked to write a study about the church's teachings on contraception. I said yes, even though I didn't want to. Like, I was not in the mood to give fertile couples a pep talk about having babies, which is how I was perceiving of my assignment at that point. But as I worked on the study, I came to see that God was not asking anything different of me and my husband than he asked of any other couple. He was asking us to trust him with our fertility, just like we trusted him with every other part of our lives. And that is the one thing I was not doing. Like, I was taking all the pills and doing all the diets and having all the surgeries, but I wasn't trusting. I was calling the shots. I wanted to be in control. Like, I wanted what I wanted, and I expected God to deliver on that. And when I realized that's what was going on in my soul, Chris and I talked, and we decided we would take a break. So no more fertility diets, no more hormones, no more charting. Like, we were just going to be a normal married couple and try not to think about conceiving. I told God at that point, I was like, you got Mary pregnant without her even having sex. So you can get me pregnant without me taking all the hormones. It was at that point that Chris and I started seriously talking about adoption. We talked about adoption before. We were very open to adoption, but for various reasons, namely money, we didn't think it was an option for us. But as soon, and I mean as soon as we started seriously considering it, God moved. Like, he moved so fast. It's like he was just waiting for us to open the window to adoption, and he started like throwing babies in as fast as he could. I was like, catch, okay, Lord. We actually ended up adopting 3 babies in 2.5 years. It was amazing. Our youngest 2 are only 8 months apart, so that's why it's like the 4-4, 4-3. We had spent a month in a NICU with our second son. He was born very early, and we got back, and 6 days after we returned from that month in Texas, we got a call that our oldest son's birth parents were expecting again, and they wanted us to adopt. And when my husband came in and told me this, because he was the one who took the phone call, I thought I was being punked. I was like, no, like, there's no way. But we were not being punked, and now I have 2 little kids who love to tell people that they're twins, which is hilarious because one is black and one is white. So, like, you see the looks on people's faces, and they're like, genetics are a freaky thing. But it was amazing. So if you look at the timeline, that's 3.5 years after I had knelt on that chapel floor. I had 3 babies under 3. It was wild and beautiful and wild and miraculous and pretty wild. And it still is wild. Like, our house is just bursting with life, like this messy, glorious, exhausting life. And people always try to be so nice to me. They're like, oh, they're keeping you young. And my response is, or killing me quick. Like, I don't know, but it's probably a bit of both. But I wouldn't have it any other way. Like, my children are such a gift. And Chris and I are so wildly blessed to get to be their parents. And all of this is a very long way of telling you why a 50-year-old woman has 2 4-year-olds. But it's also more than that. Like, I have spent so much time telling you my story because I believe that our conversations about life always have to start with compassion for the person standing in front of us. We have to be able to look at them and see their grief and their wounds and their trauma, because if that person is contemplating taking a life, whether through abortion or IVF, we have to see them before we can talk to them about the issue. As a movement, as a pro-life community, we've gotten so good about doing this with women in abortion, right? We are getting better and better at articulating that we don't just hate abortion because of how it hurts children, but because of how it hurts women, how it tempts them in their most vulnerable hours, how it preys upon their fears and lies to them about what they are capable of, and then leaves them with wounds that go soul deep. Like, I'm so grateful for the work of groups like Silent No More and Feminists for Life and women like my friend Bryce Griffin, who have shared their experiences of abortion with us so that we can talk to abortion-vulnerable women from a place of empathy and compassion and not condemnation. But, you knew there was a but coming. We also have to be able to do this with IVF. This is an issue that large swaths of the pro-life community have not wanted to talk about. It's like the third rail. We don't want to touch it. We say that it is a separate issue from abortion and that we have to put first things first. But it's not a separate issue from abortion. And if we are serious about protecting the lives of the 300 to 400,000 babies that died from pharmaceutical abortions last year in the US and Canada during the first weeks of their life, then we have to talk about the millions of tiny human beings who are passing away in laboratories or being frozen in storage units at an age not that much younger than the babies who are dying from the abortion bill. Abortion is a grave evil. In just 1 year, from 2022 to 2023, 985,000 babies lost their lives to abortion. But IVF takes more lives than abortion. In that same time period, from July 2022 to July 2023, 1.6 to 1.9 million embryos were created in laboratories that were then discarded, lost through miscarriage, or frozen in storage units. This number is necessary because IVF is so unsuccessful. Only 1 in 4 pregnancies result in a live birth. And so huge numbers of embryos have to be created for every single procedure. Not always, you can try to do it without it, but it usually doesn't work and it's expensive. So the norm is many embryos. And here's another difference between abortion. Abortion primarily takes the life of babies who are unexpected, right? Their parents were not planning on getting pregnant. IVF takes the lives of children who were intentionally created and then discarded because they weren't healthy enough or because they were unnecessary. When Chris and I were struggling with infertility 7, 8 years ago now, 1 in 8 couples were struggling with infertility. That number is now 1 in 6 couples. IVF is becoming more and more the route that couples are going to that are struggling with this as well. So in Canada, over the past 10 years, the rates of IVF usage for couples struggling to treat infertility have doubled. This isn't a problem that's going away. It is a problem that is growing rapidly. And as a pro-life community, if we are serious about protection at conception, then we have to talk about this issue. Our consistency and our integrity as a pro-life community depends upon it. And I know these conversations are not easy to have. I've been so anxious about this talk. This is not a normal talk for me to give. Even for those of us who are deeply committed to the personhood of the unborn, we struggle to see why IVF is a problem or talk about it in our communities. And in part, this is because of what I was talking about earlier. It's because of the grief of the infertile couple. My desperation, my crushing sorrow is not unusual. That's the norm for couples who are dealing with infertility. Someone once told me that infertility is a cross of biblical proportions. And they were right. Just think about scripture. Again and again, as you read through the pages, you see Sarah and Rachel and Rebecca and Hannah and Elizabeth crying out to God for a child. Tradition also tells us that St. Anne, Jesus' grandmother, struggled with infertility for decades before Jesus was born. There is something epic about infertility. Epic and primal. And it leads women to do desperate things. Think about Sarah and Abraham for a minute. When Sarah could not get pregnant, she offered Hagar to Abram as a surrogate. That was a bad idea. Abraham taking her up on it, really bad choice. Just look at what happened. Hagar gives birth to Ishmael, who becomes the father of the Arab people, and Sarah and Abraham eventually give birth to Isaac, who becomes the father of the Jewish people. And we can see how that's played out for the past 3,000 years. It is the worst case of sibling rivalry ever. But Sarah couldn't see that. All she could see were her empty arms. And that is all the couples who are struggling with infertility can see either. They can't see that they are violating the rights of their child to be conceived in an act of love between a husband and wife, and not in an act of self-abuse in a laboratory. They can't see that they are treating their child as a commodity, as a right to which they are entitled, and not a gift to be received. They can't see that they are partnering with an industry that is making billions off the pain of the infertile, that is exploiting the bodies of men and women who are acting as sperm donors and egg donors and surrogates, and who is taking millions of lives each year. They also can't see the struggles that their children might have someday, struggles that I hear about all the time from adults who were conceived through IVF, struggles with identity, struggles with faith, struggles trying to figure out why they are the lucky ones who made it out of the womb when so many of their siblings, their brothers and sisters, were discarded in laboratories or frozen on ice. When I think about infertile couples who are choosing IVF, I get very emotional because I feel their pain. It is almost impossible for me to not say, I totally know why you did that. I get it, because I do get it. You know, with someone who had studied the church's teachings for 17 years on sexuality and marriage and human dignity, wanted to do IVF, we can't expect much more from people who have not studied this and who don't have the foundation in ethics that I did. The grief of infertility blinded me. It can blind couples. And it can blind couples as much as the fear can blind couples to the wrong of abortion. It can also blind couples who love the people who are struggling with infertility. Like, infertility is a heavy cross to carry, but it is a heavy cross to watch people carry. You know, it is a hard thing to watch people you love, people who you know want a child and who would be amazing parents, not be able to conceive a child. Like, it hurts to watch them go through that. We grieve with them for that. And when you're grieving with someone over a problem, you want to fix it. And IVF is how the culture tells us to fix it. But it is not just the grief of the couple that makes the wrong of IVF hard to see and hard to talk about. It is also the good of the child. As a culture, we don't see the embryos who are discarded in laboratories or frozen in storage units. You know, we see the child, the living child. Like, the face of IVF is not like with abortion, where we can hold up a dismembered baby. We can't hold up a frozen child on ice. All people see is the child. And how do you say a child is bad? The answer is that you don't. The child is not bad. Like, every child, no matter how they are conceived, is precious beyond words. Every child, no matter how they are conceived, is a gift. Like, the goodness of the child, the goodness of the person is not dependent upon the circumstances of their conception. Like, we say that all the time. You know, we say that children who are conceived out of wedlock, children who are conceived through rape or incest are still precious and holy and good. And if you can say that about a child who is conceived through a horrific act of violence, of course you can say that about a child who's conceived through IVF. But the goodness of the child and the wrong that is done to them are hard truths to reconcile. Like, there is a tension there, and it is hard for a lot of people to live in the tension. And I know this because I am one of them. One of the greatest mysteries of my life is that if my children's birth parents had respected the moral law, not a one of them would be here today. This is a profound mystery. Like, the ways in which my children were conceived, every single one of them was a violation of God's will for marriage and sex and how babies come to be. And yet, at the same time, every one of my children was willed by God. Like, they were a thought in God's mind before he laid the foundations of the world. He knew them before he knitted them together in their mother's wombs. They are precious. And their suffering, the suffering of their birth mothers, is something I mourn. It is a hard thing to be an adoptive mother and knowing your joy is made possible by someone else's grief. I don't will the suffering of their birth mothers any more than God wills the suffering of their birth mothers. And yet at the same time, I am so glad my children are here. And I am so glad that I get to be their mother. Like the world is better for them, and I am better for them. And the only way that I can make sense of this is to marvel at God's goodness. Like his goodness is so great that he can take all of the evil we do and bend it to bring something even more beautiful out of it. Like before time began, he has seen everything that can happen, and he brings light out of darkness and order out of chaos and right out of wrong, and that is a wonder. Like he is a wonder, and because he is a wonder, every child conceived through IVF is a wonder. Like their dignity is not in question. They are not the problem. The problem is that their rights were violated from the very moment of their conception. Their dignity was not respected. And that is a hard truth to speak, especially when we know that truth is going to be heard by those children and their parents who do love them more than life. There's one thing more that makes IVF hard to talk about and the problems of it hard to see, and that is abortion itself. IVF is part of abortion's legacy. It has only been able to flourish because of what court rulings like Roe v. Wade in the United States and R.V. Morgenthaler here have taught us. The law is not just a policeman. It doesn't just say, that's okay, no, can't do that. The law is a teacher. It shapes how we think about right and wrong. And what the laws or lack thereof about abortion in the West have taught us is that the littlest of lives in their first days, weeks, and months are not really lives at all. It's also taught us that some lives matter more than others, and that sickness, poverty, and fear are a just reason to take a life. In the US and in Canada and around the world, people have learned those lessons. Like they've built their lives around them, and they have been wounded by them, even if they don't know it. But it's not just those who have suffered through an abortion or who have aided and abetted an abortion who have been wounded by abortion. We have all been wounded by abortion. Even those of us who are deeply committed to the pro-life cause, who believe in the personhood of the unborn, have been wounded. We have all been formed by a culture that pits mother against child, that dehumanizes the little and the weak and the different, that fetishizes violence, encourages selfishness, and discourages sacrifice. And that shows. It shows in the way we talk to people online, saying things with our keyboard that we would never say with our mouths. It shows in how we drive, like racing at breakneck speeds down the freeway, putting our needs and our schedule ahead of the other lives on that highway. It shows in what we watch on television, where we watch shows about real people with real problems and real wounds and hold them up for mockery and judgment. It shows in how we date and how we shy away from commitment and satisfy our desires with casual hookups and online pornography, using others rather than being a gift to others. It shows in how we treat children, complaining when their parents have the audacity to bring them into public spaces like restaurants or planes. It shows in how we treat the elderly, thinking of them as useless when they are no longer economically useful. And it shows in how we order our days, our budgets, our work lives, our families, placing family and community and time with people we love below power and money and other material markers of success. As a culture, we don't know who we are. We don't know who our neighbor is either. We have been formed by the laws of abortion. We have learned the lessons it has to teach, and it has been an effective teacher. So, of course, given all of that, Of course we don't see the wrong of IVF. Like, we have been blinded in countless little ways. And the only way we can end abortion is by starting to look at how in our own hearts we have been shaped by the abortion culture. I don't have an easy answer for you about how we unlearn those lessons. I don't have an easy answer for you about how we end IVF, short of proclaiming the gospel and converting to the world to Christ, which is not easy, because if it were easy, the whole world would be converted to Christ. But I do know we have to start the conversation. And that conversation starts where we talked, with all we talked about tonight, with treating people with compassion, with having mercy for people who are tempted to IVF and who have used IVF, just like we're merciful with post-abortive women. It also starts with talking about the dignity of the child and always making sure we are firm that that child is precious, that the lives conceived through IVF are willed by God and loved by God. But at the same time, we have to speak firmly and communicate that IVF still violates the rights of the children to which it gives life. All of the children, not just the ones discarded or frozen, but the ones who are actually born through IVF. Beyond that, as a community, we've got to start investing time and energy and resources in helping the couples who are struggling with infertility. Like, that's what we've done with abortion, right? We've started crisis pregnancy centers, and we've started beautiful ministries that help abortion vulnerable women. We need to do something for IVF vulnerable couples. We need to make sure that they have access to resources that will help them conceive in ethical ways. And we need to make sure they have access to resources to couples like me and my husband who have walked this journey, and that they can talk to us and know that they're not alone. Like, IVF is often called, or infertility is often called the silent cross, because people don't want to talk about it. They feel like I felt, like you're a failure, something you should be ashamed of. Infertility is not something to be ashamed of. And those of us who have walked that path have to start stepping up and telling our stories so that these couples can find a better way. Now, when it comes to better ways to conceive, I know that can be tough in Canada, where it's hard to be a pro-life doctor. We have good friends in the States who actually moved there from Canada because of that. But somehow in the US and Canada, we have to start connecting couples with more NAPRO doctors and other medical treatments that deal with infertility in ethical ways. Like, IVF isn't just unethical, it's not a treatment for infertility. Like, IVF doesn't seek to find out why you're not getting pregnant. It doesn't seek to heal the woman's body or make it stronger. It just tries to override the system. We always say that women deserve better than abortion. Women deserve better than IVF. Like, we deserve real medicine that heals our bodies and doesn't just lay the groundwork for more health problems down the road. There is one thing more that each of us can do to unlearn the lies of abortion. We have to take a long look in our hearts and see how we think about and talk about and treat others, especially those who are sick and vulnerable and poor and migrants and different and difficult and disagree with us on fundamental issues of politics and life and faith. Years ago, I'm going to end with a little story. God gave me a great gift that fundamentally shifted how I saw the human person. It wasn't a unique grace. He's given it to other people, but on one night in November of 2001, he gave it to me. And what happened was this. I was in my favorite coffee shop. I was reading, and at some point I looked up and just sort of glanced it around me. And there was not too many people there that night. There was an older couple who were having coffee. There was the Ethiopian waitress who worked at the bagel shop next to my office. There was a young man who was always there like I was studying. And there was an older man who I had never seen before. When I first looked up, they looked ordinary, normal, nothing remarkable about them. And then in the next second, they were luminous. They were shining like a polished diamond. Like they were literally bathed in a light that I don't know how to describe except to say that it looked like love. And in that moment, I saw them. Like not their wrinkles or their sins or their worries, but them. Like I saw who God created them to be, and they were beautiful. Like they were precious, they were sacred, they were masterpieces of the Father who had been made in his image. And in that moment, I wanted to bow down before them, or grab their hands and kiss their faces and throw my arms around them. Like they were so beautiful and so beloved, and I wanted them to know that I saw that. I wanted them to see it too. But I didn't throw my arms around them because that would have been really weird. Instead, I just cried. I just wept at their beauty. And then just like that, it was done. Like the light was gone. It was an ordinary Tuesday night in November all again, and everybody just looked as they had before. But for me, nothing was ever the same again. Like that was 24 years ago, and not once since that night have I questioned why Jesus died for us. And not once since that night have I questioned why Satan hates us. He wanted that glory for himself, but God shared it with man. And so Satan wants revenge on humanity for that glory. He wants it all to himself still, and that's why Satan loves abortion. It's not just because of the lives it takes, but because abortion blinds whole cultures to our dignity and our beauty. God made us to shine like the sun, and most of us have no clue about that. But we need to. It's the only way we're going to end abortion for good. It's the only way we're going to end IVF, by understanding our dignity and the dignity of others. I'm going to add one last thing before I have to leave. I want you to know how profoundly grateful I am for everything that the Catholic Church taught me about IVF. Not just that it was wrong, but why. Like, I can't thank God enough for giving me the foundation in knowledge and understanding that helped my husband and I say no to IVF. I was not grateful that day on the chapel floor, but I am grateful now. Like, God gave me the grace to trust him, even when in my pain, I wanted nothing to do with him. I would have preferred to do things my way. I didn't deserve the grace that God gave me. But if I hadn't said yes to that grace, I wouldn't be mother to Toby, Beckett, and Ellie. And that's about the saddest thing that I can think of. I said earlier today, I don't go into details about my children's stories, but as I mentioned on the platform, every single one of my children were conceived and carried to term in circumstances that most people would say justify abortion. Even people who call themselves pro-life would say that my children were exceptions. But their mothers did not see them as exceptions. They saw them as children, and they chose life for them. And because they made that choice, I was able to say yes to them when they offered me the chance to be their mother. Because my husband and I said no to IVF, we were able to say yes to the children God did have for us. And I can't thank God enough for that grace. In our darkest hours, truth can seem so hard and unloving. God can seem so unloving. But God is not unloving. And truth is sometimes firm, but it is rooted in God's limitless love. And he sees everything. We don't know what's going to happen 5 minutes from now. He knows what is going to happen every day until the end of time. So whatever cross you are carrying right now, whatever truth you are struggling with, remember that God loves you and he really knows what he's doing. Trust him. Thank you.